Hello, everyone. My name is Haley, and I'm a steering committee member of the Putting the Pieces Together conference. Before we dive in, I have a few housekeeping notes for this session. This session will be recorded and available on the Pain Canada YouTube channel and the website after the conference. For translation and interpretation, you can look at the bottom of your screen and you will see a button CC. Use that to access translation and closed captions. So you click on that and select your desired language. This conference will be simultaneously have French audio translation available to access. To access this option, please follow the Zoom link posted in the session description. Information about where to seek help in event of crisis during this conference is available in the exhibit area in the Zoom platform. You can send your questions to the speakers through the Q&A function in Zoom. And one last reminder, so like when you put the questions in the Q&A section, please be mindful of being respectful so we can ensure this is a safe space for all. So with that being said, welcome to day 4 of the 2025 Putting the Pieces Together conference, a conference for and by people living with pain. For any social media posts, you can use the hashtag PTP2025 within those posts. Today, we will have 3 sessions. So the first session is overcoming diversity through the power of human connection. Then the next sessions afterwards will be art and stories, digital storytelling, and we'll end on the note of peer-supported social connection groups. There will be 2 15-minute breaks between sessions. And please remember that the conference has been designed for people living with pain. And while it's open for everyone, we've done our best to design it in a creative way for there to be a safe space for people that live with pain. And we hope that there are also researchers and clinicians who are here that can aid in learning. Please spend your time listening to people who live with pain rather than using the spaces for research or other purposes. And so I also want to take some time to thank the other PT as steering committee members and share a bit about them and why this conference is important overall. And I want to also jump in to thank the sponsors for this conference. So Pain BC and is one of the sponsors, as well as the Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research for Chronic Pain Network, the Canadian Institute of Health Research of musculoskeletal health and arthritis, and the Partnership for the Engagement of Patients with Pain Research Project in Health Canada. And finally, on a final note, many of our presenters will share stories and perspectives that shape their individual lived experiences. The views expressed here do not necessarily represent the views of Pain Canada or sponsors. So with that being said, I'll hand it off to our facilitator for our first session here.
Thanks, Haley. Welcome everyone to today's session of Overcoming Isolation Through the Power of Human Connection. My name is Jenny Lorca. My pronouns are she, they, and sha, and I'm an uninvited guest and settler of color on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish First Nation in what is colonially known as the Greater Vancouver Area. I can't tell you how excited I am to be a moderator of this for this session featuring Pete Bombachi, Therese Lane, and Delane Linkowich. But before we dive into what I know is going to be a meaningful discussion on an enormous topic, I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce myself and my connection to, well, connection. This conference, I've had the distinct privilege of entering into multiple conversations. And when I do, I always ask myself, why is this session important? And moreover, why is this session about social isolation and human connection important to me? Dr. Susan Holtzman has said that loneliness is worse for your health than cigarette smoking. And when I first heard that, I was shocked, but not unsurprised. I've lived with chronic pain and chronic and persistent pain and complex chronic disease for coming up on eight years now. And when I think back, especially to my early days, for me, the isolation and loneliness that I experienced often felt worse than the pain itself. And often it made the pain feel worse. At the time of my diagnosis, and let me just state that I was lucky to get an early diagnosis. I know lots of people for whom it took years, and even some of my friends who still are waiting for a diagnosis, and that is isolating in itself. But at the time of my diagnosis, I was probably the only one of my friends living with chronic and persistent pain and complex chronic illness at the time. How I interacted with and moved through the world changed. My relationships changed. I couldn't work anymore, so I lost that community. I lost my connection to myself, my sense of self, my sense of identity and self-worth. And some people fell away because my unpredictable condition made me unreliable. And more often than not, because I was canceling plans at the last minute or losing steam and leaving early, my lived experience did not match their expectations. Or I willingly fell away because I wasn't myself anymore. Therese, in your session on caregiving and pain earlier this week, you described, I'm getting all the feels. You described these feelings of shame and guilt and regret and of losing yourself. And that it still hits me where I live when I think about it. I had known about Pain BC and used their resources when I was a clinician. But as a patient, as a person with lived experience of pain, I turned to their community support services, which are free. And I trained and then volunteered in the Coaching for Health program. And at that time, I also recognized that I need to be supported too, but by people who understood where I was coming from. I learned that they had peer support and wellness groups in person, which I hauled my fatigued, painful self to. It exhausted me, and being around people who got it, the relief is indescribable. So I want to shout out to Michelle and Ashley, who were the facilitators who welcomed me in. And then COVID happened. And then it changed everything. And ironically, being pretty housebound, I found my world opening up in a very different way. Zoom boomed. And then Pain BC did a massive pivot and shifted all of their peer support groups from in-person to online. And then guess what? The world of virtual human connection to others living with pain opened up for a lot of people in a lot of ways. We now have 13 pain-specific peer support and wellness groups, 8 regional throughout BC, and then 5 affinity and identity-based groups. 2 of them include Punjabi and Mandarin language. Amazing. I encourage you to go check it out. This was a shameless plug. And so huge love and thanks to Dorota, Melanie, Paul, Melissa, Maria, and especially Carmel. So I make no secret of how obviously important and powerful I think peer support is. There is mutuality, this bidirectional relationship, this acknowledgement of there is so much we can learn from and teach each other. The mutuality that exists in peer support groups serves to mitigate or even flatten power dynamics that you would see in other support groups that are actually led by clinicians and then the patients, right? This is person to person. There's a shared experience and understanding that nobody else, unless you got it, you get it. So, and I know Delane, who is also on the steering committee, will back me up on this when I say we as a conference committee, we are so thrilled to be able to provide these peer-supported social connection sessions as a regular program embedded within this conference. And in fact, there's one coming up this afternoon that Haley mentioned. So, and yet, I still see many people left behind, especially when there are well-meaning, but dare I say, ableist pressure for people for in-person gatherings, folks with sensory needs, folks without access to transportation or safe companion or a computer or a private space or even a safe space, folks who are immunocompromised and who have to go through many emotional and mental hoops and energy and anguish to create a space where people can meet them safely because their health and possibly even their life is literally at risk. That is isolating. So why is this important? Because to me, human connection also means understanding our interconnectedness. And to riff off Pain BC, whose mountaintop goal is no one lives alone in pain, this goal that no one lives alone in pain. This goal that fuels every aspect of every program, every resource, every service that they offer. My mountaintop goal is I envision a world where no one in pain is alone. Now, part of the privilege of being the moderator is that I get to introduce three extraordinary individuals whose work is grounded in human connection. And I want to thank Alvin, who laid the groundwork for this rich conversation. But instead of reading their bios, which you can see on our website, I have decided to introduce our speakers by perceived huggability factor. So we shall start with Pete Bombaci. My apologies. Pete Bombaci is a social change leader and founder CEO of Genwell, Canada's human connection movement. And more than that, he looks like a really good hugger. You could tell. I've seen it in numerous Genwell related footage. Thank you for that. That attests to how being in his presence is uplifting. He seems like, and I'm sure we will discover, that he is the epitome of everyone's favorite uncle. Warm, approachable, kind, knowledgeable, inspiring, and maybe a little goofy, but we will find out. Welcome, Pete. We are so excited that you could join us today. Therese Lane is someone whom I can definitely say is a good, tight hugger. Therese's work in the pain and arthritis community and her ongoing advocacy for marginalized populations, such as those with lived and situated experience of poverty, substance use, mental health conditions, and more, keep those of us grateful to know her, to paraphrase Brene Brown, honest, brave, and kind. Therese, you look fabulous today. I hope you're enjoying the conference, and I bet your shoes are amazing. Delane Linkowich is someone whom I maybe get to hug once a year, and it's never, ever enough. Delane's deep and abiding passion for supporting youth and adolescents living with chronic and persistent pain drives her practice in clinical psychology and is the basis of her current PhD candidacy research. Delane was the catalyst and co-developer of each iteration of our conference's peer-supported social connection sessions. So anytime we get in a breakout room together, that's her genius. And conference Delane, I know my life is richer with you in it. And I think also because I love your cat. Welcome, friends. We are so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny.
Oops, I totally muted myself. So let's start off with, why is this work important to you? What got you into this? What got you into, why is this important to you? What is the work that you're doing? And how has this impacted you? I know 3 big questions, but I'm sure that the 3 of you can each weave incredible stories. Pete, I'm going to call on you first. Is that okay?
That is totally fine. And
Awesome.
I guess I'll bring up my slide just to kind of put it out there as to who I am and why I'm here. So good day, everybody. And Jenny, honestly, I feel like you almost just did my entire presentation for me. It is an absolute treat to be here. And my background is my name is Pete Bombachi, and I'm the founder and CEO of GenWell. And GenWell is Canada's human connection movement, where we've been generating wellness through the power of human connection since 2016. We launched this movement back in 2016 because we realized that we've been educating people to exercise and eat well, sleep, water, don't drink, don't drink too much, and don't smoke. But that we've never articulated for people exactly why human connection was so critically important to the health and well-being of society. So we've spent the last 9 years doing workshops in workplaces, classrooms, communities, seniors residences. We now work in municipalities, and we run 6 campaigns a year that are intended to awaken all Canadians to the importance of face-to-face social connection. So when I come to this conference, I think I come through a complementary lens to, I'm sure, what Delane and my other guests will be sharing today, because I believe that a big part of the solution to the problem that we are experiencing for those who experience chronic or persistent loneliness is the fact that other people don't understand what it might feel like and what the impact is. And the power of human connection is that when we get to meet somebody, we actually create empathy and compassion and understanding for what somebody else might be experiencing. But as long as we've never made those connections, as long as we've never understood it and had that opportunity to connect, oftentimes we can be unaware of, especially for something like chronic pain. I am a sufferer of chronic pain. I will say that it's probably more the fear of chronic pain. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and every day I'm never sure whether it's going to flare up or not. And so, the work we do at GenWell is awakening 41 million Canadians about the importance of face-to-face social connection. And our mission is to make the world a happier and healthier place by educating, empowering, catalyzing those 41 million people to build healthier connections, whether they need it, or in this case, maybe it's because we help somebody else. And I think that's really the importance of the work that we've been doing. We're a registered charity. We were recently highlighted by the World Health Organization, who launched their first ever report on social connection and social health in 78 years of their existence. So the world is awakening to this subject, and it's just great to be here as part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Pete. This is incredibly inspiring. Teresa, I see your camera's off, but do you want to go next, or would you like Delane to go next?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I know it takes courage to show up for a conversation like this, a conversation about pain, loneliness, and parts of our lives we don't always say out loud. If you're here, it tells me something about you, that you're carrying a lot and you're still trying, and that matters. Not here as a professional or an expert with all the answers. I'm here as someone who lives with chronic pain, substance use, and mental health issues. I'm someone who has known what it feels like to slowly disappear from their own life. And my hope is that by sharing a bit of my story, you might feel a little less alone in yours. Living with chronic pain changes you, not just physically, but socially, emotionally, and spiritually. And for me, that change happened slowly, almost quietly. It wasn't like one day I woke up and suddenly felt isolated. It was more like this gradual dimming of my life. At first, I started canceling plans, innocent ones. I'm just having a rough day, or I'd say, I'll come next time. But next time became Sunday, someday, and someday became never. Over time, I stopped reaching out. I told myself people wouldn't notice if I didn't show up. And to be honest, some didn't. Life moved on around me, and it felt like mine was standing still. I remember feeling ashamed that I wasn't the friend, the same family member, the same person I used to be. My illnesses made everything harder, but trying to pretend I was okay felt even harder. Eventually, it became easier to stay home than to risk feeling like a burden or like I had to explain myself again. I don't know if any of you felt that, the sense that you're too much and not enough in the same time. The mix of wanting connection so badly, but not having the energy to be on or to hold a conversation or to mask the pain. So for me, the isolation wasn't only about loneliness, it was about losing who I was. I couldn't recognize myself anymore. And when you stop recognizing yourself, it becomes even harder to believe others want to know you as you are now. If I'm being honest, one of the most painful parts wasn't the physical pain. It was the feeling that I didn't belong anywhere anymore. That everyone else had a life, a purpose, a community, and mine had slipped away. There were days I went without speaking to anyone, days when my world was so small as the room as I was sitting in. And the longer I stayed away from people, the harder it became to go back. The silence became familiar, almost safe, but definitely not healthy. I knew I was lonely, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know where to start, and I was terrified that if I did try, I would be reminded of everything I had lost. I will talk about how it did change for me, but I will let Delane talk about her barriers.
Yes, please, Therese. And thank you for always showing up as real and as raw as you are.
Yes, thanks, Therese. I'm honestly just taking a minute because a lot of what you said really, hit home for me and I think a lot of other people who are joining. And I think the power in sharing your story is just so appreciated. So thank you. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Delane. My pronouns are she and her. Today I'm joining from Hamilton, Ontario, which is located on the unceded and stolen land and traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. I'm really, really grateful that I get to be here today and sit in such welcomed company of all of these very huggable people. Thank you for that really thoughtful introduction, Jenny. I'm joining today as a person who lives with chronic pain, and I've lived with pain for over 15 years, most of which was as an adolescent and now as a young adult. I'm also joining though as a PhD candidate in clinical child and adolescent psychology at the University of Guelph. And I'm also hoping to bring some of my experiences in my work at the Pediatric Chronic Pain Program at McMaster Children's Hospital as well. So when, we were kind of talking about this session, it really made me kind of think of and reflect on my own experiences as a young person living with chronic pain, and especially as an adolescent. And that's something I honestly do quite a bit, given this is my area of research and clinical work. And it really allowed me to just sit with and think about, this piece of life, right? Where living with chronic pain can be so isolating. And Therese really, spoke to that really, really well. And something I wanted to add to that, which I often felt and still sometimes feel, is, we talk about social isolation and loneliness often. And usually what comes to mind is this idea of being alone, being on your own, being, one person in a dark room or something like that. But I think the other part of isolation and loneliness that, a lot of people and for people with chronic pain feel is that you can be in a room full of people and still feel incredibly alone and isolated. And this is something that I continue to feel and especially felt as an adolescent living with chronic pain. Because as someone who's, a child or adolescent living with chronic pain, socializing is like a pretty big part of your life. That's when you're really learning to socialize and you're making friendships and you're breaking friendships and all of those sorts of things. And so it's really, you know, even more difficult when you have chronic pain. And actually what we know is that youth with chronic pain experience a lot more loneliness than do their peers without pain. And we also know that Black youth with chronic pain experience even more loneliness. So, and we know that this loneliness and social isolation can have devastating impacts on mental health outcomes and just overall well-being. And so, I'm glad Jenny brought up this stat of, social isolation and loneliness are associated with kind of the same risk as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Like it's a social isolation is a huge thing, right? That can have detrimental impacts on your health. And especially, speaking about my own experiences as a young person, which are honestly quite similar to a young adult or just like an adult in general, is canceling on friends, right? Like Therese talked about, like canceling on people and then the guilt that comes with that, right? Not just canceling, but then the guilt. Missing school or missing work because of appointments or because the pain is just too much that day. Also wanting to talk about that idea of, being in a room full of people and feeling alone, which often comes from the feeling of not being understood and not feeling that, anybody understands what you're going through. And with chronic pain, that's something that happens, almost every day, if not multiple times a day. And that in itself, feeling misunderstood and not being believed, right, can be so isolating and really make you feel like you're the only person that is out there who experiences chronic pain. So like Therese said, I also want to talk about, kind of the hopeful side in the sense of like things that also can help with, reducing social isolation and loneliness. But I'll save that. So I'll pass it back to Jenny.
Thanks, Elaine. I really appreciate how, and understandably so, the idea of empathy, deep empathy and understanding that comes from sharing experiences. I mean, our experiences might not necessarily be the same, but at least it gives some understanding of, I think Pete, when you were talking about how important it is for people to meet people, and share, just share stories, which is what we're doing today, right? Which is what we've been doing this entire conference and in many conferences. I think it was the Human Connection Conference that Pete, that you recently concluded. It is about making the world a human library in which we can truly learn about each other. So I want to learn, and I'm sure that everyone else does, what, and I was going to say key solutions and strategies and interventions, but really because that's clinical. I want to step back from the clinical stuff. What are the things that you hinted at in your introduction that that alleviate or mitigate the loneliness? How do you build these connections? Pete, are you open to going first?
I'm
Awesome.
excited to go first and continue this incredible conversation. Part of the work we do when we do our social health workshops across this country is empower people with the information that most of us were never educated on. As I say, we educated people on so many other things, but not on the importance of social connection. But just here's some of the Canadian research that we've built, over the course of the last 9 years, which is, we've told people for 50 years not to talk to strangers. And yet the research is very clear that those who connect with strangers, and that doesn't mean a long conversation. It could be a smile, it could be a hello, but just doing it once a week can make you up to 3 times happier. And that it increases optimism, trust, safety, security, inclusion, belonging, sense of community. And so even this T-shirt that I'm wearing is actually promoting Talk to a Stranger Week, which is November 24th to 30th. And it really is about saying that small talk can have a big impact. And again, I will say that, again, Genwell takes a broader perspective on this whole concept of human connection. But I think in the context of what we're talking about today, I don't want to I think too often we put the burden of the solution on the individual who's suffering. And what we're trying to do is say to 41 million Canadians, maybe you know somebody who has chronic pain. And maybe during Talk to a Stranger Week's not the right idea, but in Talk to a Stranger Week, you could actually talk to anybody and you never know, maybe they are suffering from chronic pain. So a hello today, a smile, how are you doing? But we do Genwell Weekend, we do Seniors Loneliness Awareness Week. We do all these campaigns to raise the collective consciousness of the importance of these little interactions, and maybe thinking about a friend that you know has chronic pain, and that you, through a conversation, might change their day or maybe their life. Because we know there is a correlation between loneliness and pain and loneliness. And so, as you said right off the top, Jenny, this is bidirectional. So if we can raise everybody's sense of connection, inclusion, belonging, mattering, community, whatever word is the word that you choose to describe this, then we all win. Whether we're suffering today or we use human connection as a means to our purpose because we recognize that by saying hello to somebody, I might make somebody else's day better. But because we have not educated people like we have, like I know I'm supposed to exercise 20 minutes a day. I know I'm supposed to have 8 glasses of water. I know I'm supposed to sleep 8 hours a night. Now, whether I do it or not is still up to me. And to be honest with you, I've struggled with my weight my whole life. But at the end of the day, I am 59 years old and nobody has ever explained to me how critically important social connection is for our health, our happiness, our longevity, and for the betterment of society. On the negative side, the research that we, speak to, of course, it's Julianne Holt-Lundstad, who said the 15 cigarettes a day, but it also increased your early risk, early onset of dementia, higher risks of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, suicide, addiction, obesity, cancer. It's connected to so many downstream, but the power and our whole movement is focusing on the positive and the solution. Is that the research shows that, and some of you may be familiar with the 85-year study out of Harvard by Robert Waldinger, it's the single greatest contributor to happiness. It reduces anxiety and depression. It increases empathy, compassion, resilience, strengthens our immune system, strengthens our self-confidence. As a study came out of Boston, Massachusetts, General says it's the single greatest preventative action to avoid depression. And, the only unfortunate of this whole thing is that we never took the time to tell anybody. And that's really been our mission for the last 9 years. And I encourage everybody, and, thanks to Lane for putting our website into the chat earlier. I encourage everybody, help us spread this message so that the people who don't know what it might be like to live with chronic pain and the impact that reaching out to somebody who is experiencing it, how that might change somebody's day or life, because we are in this together. And in the world that we're in right now, whether it's chronic pain or just struggling with all the challenges that we face as a society, we need each other more than ever before.
And thank you. I appreciate deeply how Genwell, you and Genwell take the broader scope of things, because it is all interconnected, as you said. Pain is a massive umbrella, and it's not only, I'm never going to say only, and it is one aspect of many of our existences. The sense of belonging, the sense of empathy, the sense of connection, the sense of community also encompasses so much more of that. And yeah, it is that bidirectional relationship. Whew. Thank you for that. I am going to And thanks, Elaine, for putting Jenwell's site on the chat. Therese, I know that you mentioned in your introduction that there are things that you do personally to combat, I don't like using war language, to alleviate, to soothe, to re-emerge from your loneliness.
Or when things started to shift. Yeah, so it started for me it wasn't a grand moment or anything like that, or a sudden transformation. It was actually something very ordinary. I was an inpatient in a treatment center, and part of our program was 1 day a week. We used to go to the YMCA, and we would walk there. We would walk back. We would exercise or swim or not, but we were together. And at first, like, I was thinking, oh gosh, I was worried I wouldn't fit in there too. And I was worried that I even feel even more alone in a room full of people, like Delane was mentioning. But when I went, that one step was the beginning of everything shifting for me. Not all at once, I have to say that. It's not an easy sell to tell somebody to exercise when they're in terrible pain. But I found that on the day that I did walk to the YMCA, spend time with other people, and I felt better, not only physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So, and it was also, it was actually there that I met someone who introduced me to patient engagement. But that was a little bit later on, because once I left the program that I was on, I joined the YMCA, and I still go every day to this day. Every morning I am there at 6 a.m. and it's the routine that is important in my life. So I think and then I think it was realizing how actually lonely and isolated I was. I found it difficult to talk to people. I always used to think I was going to say the wrong thing. I would laugh inappropriately, and I don't know, just so. And so when you've been isolated, even sending a message or stepping outside can feel like climbing a mountain, I felt. And so please, like, don't think you have to leap. Like, for me, it started with small but invisible steps, sitting in a shared space rather than sitting in my room, or saying yes to 10 minutes instead of a whole outing, or if deciding to meet up, leave early and letting that be okay. I didn't have to prove anything. Small is enough. Small is brave. Connection doesn't have to feel loud or social or energetic. It can be gentle, quiet, and brief, and still count. Sorry. When I was saying about the structure, when you're lonely, waiting until you feel up to it, that doesn't work. I waited months and nothing changed. What helped me was the structure, the routine of getting up in the morning and having something to get me out of bed. For me, it was the YMCA program. For you, it could be a weekly class, a support group, a drop-in program, a faith community, a library, a walking group, or even a recurring phone call with one person. The routine became a lifeline, a soft place I returned to even when I felt numb or disconnected. Over time, it helped rebuild my capacity to be around others without pressure to perform or to be the old me. Sometimes structure can hold us even until we remember how to hold ourselves again. I could make some notes here. Just be kind to yourself. This one took me the longest to learn. Re-entering the world when you've been isolated can bring up shame, grief for the life you used to have, and fear of being judged. If all you do is show up once and then you need a break, that's still progress. Connection is not a straight line. Some weeks you'll take a step forward, some weeks you'll pull back. That doesn't mean you failed, it means you're human. There is no timeline, there is no right way, there is only your way, at your pace. So don't compare the version of you today with the version of you before pain. You deserve compassion for the person you are now, a person who has survived so much and is still trying.
Therese, I think every single word that comes out of your mouth needs to be transcribed and prescribed. Small is enough. Small is
I'm
great.
I'm always trying lots of wisdom.
Oh, like little wisdom bombs. One thing I wanted to add to that, and like an excellent list of multiple ways of connecting. And for myself, for my friends and myself, we are all neurospicy and sometimes don't always have the capacity to respond right away. The expectation that no response is just as good. It's the giving or the receiving. I have friends that I never talk to or text with, but we send each other memes on a regular basis, and that's our love, right? So it's, yeah, there's only your way, your pace. Be kind to yourself. I need to write this on a t-shirt. Small is enough. Small is brave. Thank you so much. Delane, you mentioned you alluded to something in your introduction about the work that you were doing with the population that you work with, and also possibly things that have worked for yourself. We've got a few minutes. Could you speak on that before we go into questions? And there are some really good ones too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I'll start with the things that have kind of worked for me, as well as, things that I've heard have worked for other people as well. And I said it's funny because Therese already shared a lot of them. So it's good because again, I'm going to reemphasize the importance of starting small, right? And that's the thing. Like sometimes it can, like Therese said, it can feel like a mountain to like get out or talk to people. But starting small is okay. And it can be, like Jenny said, sending memes. I know sending voice notes is another nice thing because sometimes, texts are nice and like hearing someone's voice, there's just something really special about that. And that can make you feel, closer. And obviously things like FaceTiming, if you can't get out of the house, are really great resources. Like Therese said, joining community groups, community clubs. There are lots of free and accessible groups and clubs, many of which Therese already mentioned. There's also online groups, right? Whether that be peer support, which I'll talk more about in a second, and things like discussion boards, discords, Reddits, just online spaces where there are other people who you can talk to. And it doesn't, it can be about chronic pain, but it can also be about something that interests you or hobbies or things like that that can be really nice to engage in. Also, sometimes just like sitting in someone else's presence. Sometimes you don't need to say a lot, but just being with somebody else can be really helpful. And then, Jenny, you said, can you talk about the work that I'm doing now? And to do that, I do have to give a little bit of context. I know where we're at in time, so I'm going to be brief. And I want to say that it genuinely wouldn't be for like the stuff that I'm doing now without those experiences I had, but also the power of meeting other people who have chronic pain. And I feel extra special to get to sit on this panel specifically with Therese and you, Jenny. And Pete, I hope that we can continue connecting. And Therese was one of the very first people I met with chronic pain, and she changed my whole entire life. And so I am genuinely forever grateful for her. There's just not enough words, yeah, to explain how much I genuinely appreciate you. And in Jenny, I found a soulmate, that has, we could talk about peer support and just really anything for hours. So I just appreciate you too. And it's through meeting other people with chronic pain that has allowed me to be more hopeful and to really kind of direct the work that I'm doing in my career on. So, because I work in child and adolescence, I've, thought about my own experiences, but spoken to other youth who live with chronic pain, and kind of to link back to what Pete said, when we think about how the typical treatment approach to chronic pain is, or how we think about chronic pain is the biopsychosocial, but where is the social? Where is the social? Like that's a part of the word, but there's no social really anywhere, right? We always talk about the bio or the psycho, but not the social. And so that's what my work strives to do is I've worked with youth with chronic pain, their caregivers, as well as healthcare professionals to really develop a group peer support program for youth with chronic pain, because this is something that they have voiced a need for, and is something that, I could have used myself. And I know so many other people that I speak to are like, wow, if I could have met other people who know what it's like Jenny said something at the beginning, like if we got it, we get it. And I need to get that put on a t-shirt, because I think there's just such, yeah, power in being able to sit in a room or sit in a digital space or talk to other people who get it. And so, I'm working to develop and study that as well. And I'll quickly share my screen. I was going to say a little bit more about it, but I also want to make sure that we get to questions, and have more of a discussion. But I'm actually currently looking for people, specifically youth, to participate in a pilot study for this group that I've developed, like I said, co-created with other youth with chronic pain. And so I'm looking for people and I'm just starting small. Speaking of starting small, because I can only do so much in my PhD, but I'm starting small by starting this group in Edmonton, Alberta, and then Hamilton, Ontario. So we're looking for youth with chronic pain. You can just quickly scan the QR code in the bottom there if you're interested in joining, and we can chat more about it. I'll put my email as well in the chat if anyone wants to connect. But there is so much power in peer support, and that's why we have peer supported social connections within this conference. And there's also lots of peer support resources in the exhibition space of this conference platform. So please go and check those out. And meet other people with chronic pain. It'll change your life.
Thank you, Delane. We often say Jenny and Delane share one brain, so thank you for that. I'm going to ask you, Delane, when you have a moment, if there is a link, you can put that in the chat. What I will say is that what I'd like to offer is that we can compile the resources that we've shared, Pete, your site, the Talk to a Stranger Week, and create a page on the exhibitor's site so that people who are interested in checking out the resources that we've mentioned can go to that. Oh, yes, something about, oh yeah, you talked about, Delane, the social aspect of the biopsychosocial piece is missing. And I know that there was an article published in, I think, 2023 that wants to flip that paradigm and call it the social psychobiological model. So I'll see if I can find that article and also put that in the resources. We have 11 minutes. There are some really excellent questions in the chat. Let me get to some really great ones. Very quickly, Pete, I think you mentioned, you already answered, where is Genwell situated? I think it's in Toronto, yeah?
We're a national organization. We do workshops across the country, but I am in Toronto.
Okay. Peer support group. So someone here mentioned that they were looking for peer support groups. If they're in a hybrid virtual. Okay, so they were referred to People in Pain Network and signed up last night. Any other virtual groups out there? So if this person was, if you were referred to People in Pain Network through the Power Over Pain portal, which I will remember to put up in the chat, they have a list of national pain specific peer support groups that are offered. That said, there are also places where if you have a specific diagnosis, they also have a lot of peer support groups out there, like Arthritis Society of Canada, I believe. So while there might be some overlap, I know that there's like a chronically queer group in BC. I'm still unsure about what's available in Toronto or Ontario, as if Toronto is the center of the world. Sorry, but we will find that information out. But at the very least, we can put the Power Over Pain portal site in, if not the chat now, then in the resource section. Really great question. I don't know, Pete, if you're open to answering this, or Delane even. Research shows that even a small amount of exercise can be useful. Is there any rate of social engagement, i.e. a minimum amount, recommended in the research literature? What a great question, hey?
Well, so in December of last year, Canada launched the first ever set of social connection guidelines. People can find those guidelines at socialconnectionguidelines.org. Those were developed by the incredible Dr. Kiffer Card out of Simon Fraser University, with over 100 global researchers who contributed to the first ever global set of social connection guidelines. I can tell you that with the input from the global set of researchers, they stayed away from giving a recommended time a day, because there was a great risk that that number may be very large and that most of us are a long way from getting there. So the recommendation right now is to be more conscious and more intentional around building healthier connection habits in your daily life habits and routines.
I'm curious, Pete, if that, sorry, go on, Therese.
No, it's okay.
No, please.
I was just going to say that just one small act of connection, try and make one this week, like not a big one, not a perfect one, just one small step that says, I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have we don't have anything to prove to anyone at all.
Yeah. What I appreciate about having found myself in this new pain community that I'm in is the permission to show up as you are, and to not show up even, right? There seems to be fewer expectations, and I think Therese, earlier you mentioned about masking, and how much effort it takes to show up thinking that we have to present ourselves in a specific way in order to be seen, but that is not the case. And so, Pete, for example, with your work with Genwell and talking to a stranger, it is about like those small interactions. I'm really lucky to live in a cul-de-sac of a complex where all of us know each other, and we're on a WhatsApp group. So there's a lot of conversation. And I've been here for 10 years, but in another place I lived in for almost 15 years, I didn't know any of my neighbors. And so it makes a huge difference saying hello, or even offering to pull somebody's recycling bins in, start small. Delane, did you have anything to add? No? Okay. Okay. What if the people in your life are actually the ones making you want to isolate or withdraw? How do you deal with this? Yeah. That's a hard question.
Lane, do you want to take that one? Any thoughts, or Therese?
I have a thought. It happened to when I was in active addiction. It forced my parents to kind of isolate because they'd have to answer for me. And as embarrassing as it seems right now, it was part of my life. I didn't choose for it to be that way, and I wouldn't have wished it on anyone. But I not only ruined my life, I ruined theirs too, because they came down with me. But what my parents found was again connection for themselves. My mum did join Al-Anon. They do have other groups now, but at the time there was only Al-Anon and AA. And through them they met people, and you have to, whatever situation you're in, you have to put yourself first, not the person you're hiding from. Because that
Jenny,
person's going to do whatever they want anyway. So, yeah.
If I can build on Teresa's comments there, what I would say is, the definition of loneliness is the difference between the relationships that you have and the relationships that you desire. And I think by raising the collective consciousness around how important social connection is for our health, happiness, longevity, then what we all need to do is assess who are the relationships in my life, and are they the ones that fill me up when I get to spend 5 minutes, or I get a text, as we've used as examples, or a voice message today. When those people, and when I see those people, do they fill me up, or do they actually drain me, or do they lead me down paths, to Therese's point, that aren't positive for my life? And I think now that we are all becoming post-pandemic more aware of how important this is, I think now, just like we think about, well, should I go and do weights today, or I should go do cardio? Like, that's how conscious we are about physical activity. We need to be that conscious around social connection in our lives. And I do love a comment that Gabor Mate has said in some of his work, who I just think is so spot on with so many of his comments. For 50 years, what we've tried to do is heal individuals and put them back out into a broken society. And I think what this conversation is saying, look, the only way we are going to get through this thing called life, I always say life is a team sport. We need wingers. And once we understand that we are in this together, and we need people around us to support us through the lives we're all going to lead, because we're all going to experience loneliness or disconnection or social isolation at some point. And so when we realize this throughout the course of our lives, and we focus more time and attention on building relationships, I think we'll all be happier, healthier, and better off.
Thanks for that, Pete.
But don't wait until you're feeling better, or
Absolutely.
yeah, just do it today. Do it now, because when you do that, you're choosing yourself, and we need to put ourselves first.
Yeah.
I know we have, oh, sorry, Clon. Go on.
So I'll just quickly say, yeah, I really agree with what Pete and Therese have said, and that can be a really hard situation to be in when, the people who are closest to you are the ones that are making you feel more isolated and more alone. And so, as Pete and Therese have alluded to, making the active choice to choose people who fill up your cup versus drain your cup. And don't be afraid to set boundaries as well, right? There are some people that I know, they're in my life, and I need to make that space, right? Because it's not going to help me. And instead, I'm going to go and connect with people who will fill up my cup, as I mentioned. And so, like we have mentioned and alluded to, there's lots of different resources, especially for other people who live with chronic pain, but lots of community groups and things like that you can go to find those points of connection that can make you feel, better and not more isolated or alone. But thanks for bringing that up. That's a really important question.
We have 1 minute, but I also want to acknowledge that there was a question in the chat about how empty online, even though online is accessible, and I'm saying that in air quotes, for many, it has made it accessible. It's made it definitely accessible for me. I seldom leave the house. I'm currently in my pajamas right now, but there are even online groups can also exacerbate that feeling of isolation and loneliness when it's supposed to be meant for connection. So I know that we can't get to this, but I did want to acknowledge this comment and the question.
And I will jump in just quickly, Jenny,
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
can. There was a study at the end of the global pandemic that showed that face-to-face interactions have 9 times the brain activity as a digital one. So exactly what you're saying, Jenny, it's really important. I sit in my basement most days doing this. And I used to go to an office where I saw people at the coffee machine and in the lunchroom. And when we have all these occasions ripped out of our lives, we need to be more conscious and intentional. How am I going to make it? How am I going to give my chance? Therese, you touched on this. How am I going to give myself a chance to connect with somebody today? Is it a coffee shop? Is it the dog park? Is it walking up my street so I run into a neighbor? Little things that we can do to increase the likelihood that we can build those healthy connections that make us all happier and healthier. Sorry to jump in.
Mic drop. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on. Thank you so much for my new friends and old friends, Pete, Therese, Delane. I'm going to pass it off to Haley. I know that there are really some excellent questions that popped in like the last 2 minutes, and unfortunately we're running out of time. I will say that we see you, and we will think about these questions too. Thank you. Take it away, Haley.
Okay, well, thank you again very much for this discussion on social isolation. And the information you presented was very valuable, in particular, how loneliness can sort of be a symptom of your chronic pain, and sometimes it's a maladaptive coping mechanism when dealing with chronic pain. So thank you again. Just a note to everyone that these sessions are recorded so you can rewatch them later. And we're going to take a break and return in 15-ish minutes. So you can check the session schedule and visit the exhibitor area in the meantime. Our next session is Art and Stories, Digital Storytelling. So please return in 50 minutes to participate.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.